First recording of the new year.
Yep.
Did we give that secret away? Because we did pre-record the one that went out on the 2nd of January. We weren't recording over Christmas.
Indeed.
So here we are.
Here we are, back.
Well into our season 3 now, episode 102.
102.
Gosh.
Haven't got a joke about that. I think I did 101 Dalmatians.
I don't think you can come up with a different joke for every different number. That would be quite something, wouldn't it?
Well, that would be.
Did you have a good break though?
I did have a good break. I have come back with man flu.
The lurgy,
so
yeah.
I'm trying not to contaminate
Should
everybody.
I step back a bit further?
So no one else wants to use this mic after I've used it, probably.
Yeah,
so.
breathing into that. No, that's your mic. You can keep that to yourself. Put your name on it.
So yeah.
All right. Should we do a podcast for 2025 then?
Let's do it.
Okay. Hello and welcome to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. We try to come up with something interesting and useful for owners and managers of small and medium-sized enterprises every week. And this week we thought we'd try and tie in with the fact that it's around about the new year, and a lot of companies at this time of year tend to think about setting their goals for the year, whether that be the budgets for the business or maybe their personal goals. So we thought we'd talk about that this week. So good as point as any to start with.
Well, my goal is to try and make it through this without coughing. So
okay.
We'll see. Short-term goals.
Yeah, that's very short-term goal. I'm sure you'll be fine. You're sounding good to me. You got your drink of water there. So we've both been part of various different goal-setting exercises, haven't we, over the years? And I would say we've learnt a lot from the methods that don't work as much as the ones that do. And there is I think I've got this sort of general skepticism around people who almost automatically come up with goals every year because they think it's the sort of thing that you have to do. And then maybe they don't even last till the end of January. You know, the classic dry January or join the gym and all that type of stuff. It's too easy to think of it as a New Year's resolution, and it's just a bit of a laugh really, and it doesn't really matter.
I am doing dry January, by the way.
Well, you did it last year though,
and it may extend. Yeah, I did it last year. It may actually extend into February. I might see how long I can go. So, but I think that your point is what's the motivation behind it?
Yeah.
So if you're just doing it, and I think there's also a tendency to say, right, okay, I've got to look at every area of my life and then come up with 3 or 4 goals under each of those, and you end up with a huge amount, and maybe that works, and I think maybe it's not a bad. I mean, I guess everyone works differently, don't they? So. For me, I tend to do that, but then realise that there's probably like 20 or 30 goals in there that you're just never going to... Yeah. They're not even going to get enough airtime to make it happen.
Well, it's back to almost trying to play the numbers game for the sake of it. You're coming up with that many goals for the sake of it. It goes back to that why. You've got to really want to achieve that goal. There's no point setting yourself a goal that you're not really bothered about achieving or not, because then you're definitely not going to get it anyway, and you're just wasting brain time even thinking about it. There was an occasion, and I'll maybe come back to this in some of the other examples, where one of those networking groups that we used to go to, and name check for Barry, who we still keep in touch with, but he chaired one of these things, and he got us all put our goals together at the beginning of the year. And one year I did take that particularly seriously, and my why was kind of a displaced why, really. It was more to show that I could set a goal and achieve it, which is a bit of a sort of meta version of a goal. Why? That's not really a proper why, is it really?
No, you probably could have done that a lot easier as well, couldn't you?
I think I probably could have done that.
Just, can I achieve something?
Yes. There it is, done it. So I chose myself 2 daft runs. I chose to learn to play the piano and run my first 10K. And I was just doing it almost because in the group I thought, I'm not just going to come up with something that everybody else does and try and show off a little bit maybe. Anyway, I ran my first 10K and learned to play the piano to grade 2, and I've forgotten it all since. But the point is that I did it there for a why, but it was a bit of an artificial why. Interestingly, I didn't carry on with the piano, but I have carried on with the running.
Was that the catalyst? Was that?
It was, yeah. That was the first 10K I ever run back when I think I was about 40. Maybe it was my 40th year, and that's why I did it. And now 15 years on, I'm run several half marathons and run regularly. So yeah, it changed my life, but not because I thought, you know what, I should really get into something more active, physical, and what about running? And I'll do that. But as it happens, because I tried to do it for the sake of it, artificially maybe, I picked it up and it did change my life.
There you go. Changed your life. There you go.
Well, in that I now run a lot more, and my knees have held out.
There you go, Barry.
So maybe,
kudos to Barry.
Oh, kudos to Barry, yeah. But anyway, having that why, you've got to really understand why you're doing it. To the point, do you think it's relevant, or do you think it's okay to say I haven't got enough of a why, so therefore I won't set a goal, or is it any goals? Because there's nothing I feel passionate enough about. Or do you think I just lacked imagination?
I think there are some big ones, such as some big whys, which will be rooted in some. I think when you really start peeling back the onion, you get to some quite core psychological or emotional driven needs. There's probably only so much capacity that most people have got to really have too many things going on there.
Yeah.
But then I think there are maybe some other things that you think, well, it doesn't need too much of a massive why, but it's just, if you're maybe something was about just, I want to be more organised this year. Something like getting the bins out on time doesn't need a huge amount of why, does it? But if that's part of a subsection of a wider kind of, I just need my life organised, then it sort of plays a part, doesn't it? So maybe it's nested goals or something. I don't know.
There's still got to be something niggling away in your mind which is making you think that's going to be important enough to even call it a goal and devote thinking time to change. But
you probably could go quite deep. It's about like having a tidy bedroom, isn't it, or tidy kitchen or whatever. There's something about the discipline of doing it, which says something about character.
Always make your bed.
And you could always get in. You could get really into that whole kind of thing as to that's just the type of person I want to be.
Yeah, but if you think, the old wish that I wish you health, wealth, and happiness. If there are three things that the different dimensions of your life that you might want to, unless you're able to sit there and say, no, I'm absolutely as good as I could imagine being on both health, wealth, and all three of health, wealth, and happiness. My family are all great, friends are great, and I'm really healthy, and business is going great. And you're unlikely to be in a position where you say, no, that's all perfect.
Yeah.
Usually there's something there that you'd think if you really put your mind to it, you could improve. So the question really is not about whether there's an improvement capacity there, but whether you're bothered to put any effort into closing the gap. Because sometimes the pain of change is higher than the pain of staying the same, so you stay the same, right? Because it takes effort to set and achieve a goal, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And why would you set a goal if you weren't even going to really put the effort in to fix it? Because then you're just setting yourself up for failure before you start.
Yeah.
And you're better off then not setting it, right? Because it's better to not achieve it, but not having said you're going to achieve it.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know. That's all a bit philosophical, isn't it?
Well, it's coming back to the whole point. If today's about, why do people set goals? I didn't want this to be here's top tips for setting goals. And don't forget your SMART objectives, folks, and all that sort of thing. Because I think by and large, more people struggle with goals because they do set them and they do really try hard and then they fail and then they beat themselves up about it. And maybe, the value that we can bring to the subject here is almost giving some understanding for why people sometimes fail at their goals or don't set them or whatever, and say that sometimes that can be okay. You've got to really want to achieve something to set yourself a goal.
I think the whole goal the process of goal setting is not a fire and forget. I think if you've never set goals before and you start thinking to yourself, right, I'm going to set some goals. The likelihood is, I would say, is that you're going to go for something where you really overshoot what you can probably achieve because you've probably read a David Goggins book or something like that where you think, well, okay, I'm going to run 5,000 miles in 3 minutes or something, and do something ridiculous. Never do 5,000 push-ups or whatever. But I think that's just partly just human nature, isn't it? So you want to say, I want to try and be the best at this, and if you're doing something completely new, then you don't really know what your capabilities are anyway, do you? So it's like, say, okay, this year I want to run a marathon. Well, if I've never really done any running, well, I don't know if am I any good at it? How long does it take to train to run a marathon? How long,
Maybe couch to 5K might be a better
Exactly.
start.
So I think a lot of people, maybe if you're new to goal setting, then that can be an issue where you overshoot. But actually that's just, you've got to view that then as part of the process to say, well, okay, first year overshot, okay, recalibrate. And I think it's okay to say, that whole kind of shoot for the stars and you might hit the ceiling kind of mantra. It's sort of, if you do set goals where you think, actually, that's just a massive stretch. And okay, I was naive because I didn't know what I was doing. Okay, recalibrate. Now you know more than what you did a month ago.
Yeah, and maybe as long as you achieve something a bit better, you can adjust your goals.
You go for the 10K that year rather than the marathon and say, okay, marathon's now 3-year goal or something.
So one of the pitfalls is definitely that over-ambition. You get all a bit carried away, and on the 1st of January you're setting something which you could probably visualise being at that point and you're happy with being at that point. Yeah, I've just run my first marathon, or I've just done whatever I've done in business or whatever. But actually, it's way too unrealistic to achieve. So you just won't get there. And maybe a sort of a corollary of that is not understanding really what your limitations are in terms of resources, time, financial, other motivations. Because it's very easy to say, I'm going to go and, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week, having never done it before. If you can clear up enough time in your week so that that is even possible, then okay, have that as a goal. But if you're going to carry on doing everything else and you're already a very busy person, then saying I'm now going to add on to my very busy schedule another 3 commitments a week of an hour or plus travel or whatever, it's just not going to happen. So you're setting yourself up again for something that you're
I think you got to
yourself
have
up
that
about.
realistic, isn't it? I used to have a goal that I would be home 60% of the week for bed and bath time. Because I was like, there's no way I can't do
all week.
I couldn't, if I could do it, then great.
Yeah.
But to set that as a goal is putting unnecessary pressure. But just because it just wasn't going to be realistic when the kids are tiny and they're going to bed at 6 o'clock or something or whatever it was. It's like, so I think there has got to be a dose of realism within all of this, and evaluating what those constraints are, and
either. Don't have such an ambitious goal, or if you really are hell-bent on achieving something that is going to take a lot of time, clear the space for it, or a lot of resources in other ways. But you've got to stop doing. Maybe sometimes prioritizing is about knowing what you're going to stop doing.
But also, here's an interesting thought about getting people to help you with your goals as well, because it's not a solo thing. So if your goals are so ridiculous that people just think, well, that's so if someone came to you and said, right, okay, in 3 years' time, I want to have a £4 billion company, and they're starting from scratch, like complete. You might look at that and think, if someone said, actually, I want to be turning over maybe $500,000 in 3 years' time, and you think, okay, that's more of a, without to knock the ambition, you might think, well, this is someone that's maybe worth helping a little bit more. So it's kind of a calibration of help, maybe, or
I suppose your point there is that if you're going to try and get others to support you along the way,
you've got to
show that you believe in it, and make it so that others can believe in you to achieve it.
Make it believable, because
as you say, I'm going to be, and the next Elon Musk in a year's time is, people will wish you well, I'm sure, but they're not going to invest an awful lot of time in helping you get there.
Seriously,
whereas you say, if they're doing something a bit more achievable in their minds, back to the whole smart thing again, but making sure that not only you believe it's achievable, but others who you rely on for their support, that they will believe that as well. So there's a couple of points there then. There's the over-ambition bit, there's for sure. There's the bit about understanding what your limitations are in terms of resources and your time. Make it believable. You've got to properly believe it. I say I'm trying to guard against that generic advice for everybody just to do the smart objectives thing, but making sure that you are being fair to yourself. I think look after yourself in this process, because I do worry that goal setting has got this sort of nasty side where people see failure, which they've set up for themselves, and needn't necessarily have done that. They could have come up with something a bit more achievable, and then they can see the small successes that they can then build on. So there's those ones. You mentioned having other people there to help you, but I think that there's another group of people that help in a different way, which is the accountability bit. And we both use this in different ways, and I still do it to this day. I have a quarterly meeting with a very good group of business owners that I meet. We rent a hotel room once a quarter as a meeting room and discuss each other's progress in our businesses. I think they call it mastermind groups and things like that in some other circles. So you do get to discuss business problems and share that, but a large part of it is that goal setting element. Although we don't formally sit down, we're meeting in a couple of weeks' time, so maybe I'll see how it goes this year, but we don't really formally sit down and write down our goals for the year. And we're all quite seasoned business people, we've been at this game for a long time. I don't think that any of us feel that by writing that down and sharing it with each other in that meeting, that's going to be the difference between us either achieving that goal or not, because a lot of us are self-driven and we probably make that happen anyway. But once you've decided to do it, it adds an extra motivation to keep it going. So if I really did sit down with that group and say, right, by the end of this year, I'm definitely going to achieve X, Y, or Z, I wouldn't want to have to go back and say, I failed at that goal. And so therefore I'm more likely to achieve it, as long as I really did believe that I could do it. If I could easily dismiss it at the end of this, but that was a fanciful goal or a nice to have, icing on the cake type goal, then if I can dismiss it that easily, what's the point of having it in the first place? It wouldn't have really meant anything. So I think and back to that point where I did learn to play piano and do my first 10K, that was a group where I really did want to not let myself down in front of. So I made sure I did it.
So who are you doing it for then? You or for them?
Well, I think I was proving something to myself then, but I used them as the proxy for it. So I didn't want them to think less of me, and I used that as my internal driver because I thought, right, I'm proud about how I present myself here. So if I set myself out to achieve a goal, especially in the sort of business we're in business advice and coaching, mentoring, and that type of work that we do, you wouldn't want to think that we can't even stick to our own goals that we set. So I suppose I used all that to kind of internalize a little bit a real motivation there. But I have to admit now, I didn't really think I've got to start running or I've got to play piano. It was more a device to be able to prove that I could set a goal. And it's made me very cautious about setting goals ever since, really. So I think, well, if that's almost gaming it. If I really need to achieve something, then, okay, set a goal for it. But don't just have the goal for the sake of achieving a goal, because it's a bit of a circular argument. Other than, building the discipline, I suppose, of having goals that you then do achieve.
Well, I think it's a good thing to do because you can easily end up at just cruising altitude, can't you, with that goal? Yeah, exactly. And I think even if you don't get all the way, you've probably got further doing something. Like even if you take the running analogy again, if you said you were going to do 10K but you only did 5, well, you haven't really failed because you haven't done nothing, right? So I think it's largely to do with people's attitude of fear of failure. And just failure in general, which I think in the UK has got a huge amount of stigma attached to it compared to maybe in the US or other places. And as Brits, failure is something that we
knock people very easily, don't we?
We don't deal with particularly well.
And do you think that's worse with the whole social media environment? And in business, it'd be LinkedIn maybe, but there's other social medias that people get too bogged down by. Comparing themselves to others all the time. That's not healthy, is it?
Yeah,
really?
So much of it is fake, isn't it? And everything. But it's still, the more you see it, the more it's going to reinforce it.
Yeah.
So my goal is not to be on social media.
Good, great. Just take them all off your phone.
Take them all off the
phone. Take half of them from you, haven't you? I guess another thing around these goals as well for me, and there's sort of two associated thoughts I've got around this. And one of them is around the habit of doing something different at a regular time or in response to a regular trigger. So if you really want to make sure that you stick at it all year, it's probably not going to be enough just to try and remember. You need some trigger to say, right, well, every time I get up or make a cup of tea or have a meeting or do a thing, I'm going to make sure that's my trigger to do this new thing, whatever it may be. Or even just say every Saturday morning, I'm going to do this. And you can really help that if other people are involved, because you have a commitment then. You don't want to let somebody else down, even if it's just to say, I'm going to meet someone once a week for a game of tennis or something. You can't play tennis on your own very easily, so you know that if you decide not to go, you're impacting someone else then. So you sort of stack the cards a little bit really and make it a bit harder. So I think building that habit, even if it's if you're trying to learn language, you do something while you're brushing your teeth in the morning, for example. Something that you already do regularly. You try and hook another habit thing to that habit you've already got. So that's one. But the other bit of it, which I think has bothered me in the past, where I failed at goals, is where I put a goal on the outcome without really properly thinking through what I'm going to do to achieve the outcome. So I'll say we had turnover goals in the past. We'll say we're going to increase our turnover in the business by X% a year. Well, that may be a sort of a high order goal. That's the end point. But you don't come to work every day and say, right, how much am I going to increase the turnover of the business by today? That's not the action. The action is do some more marketing or more prospecting or deliver more work for someone. It's something more tangible that you can do.
Yeah.
And I worry that when people set goals, these end-based goals, like I'm going to lose weight or I'm going to get fit, well, they're all very worthy things to achieve at the end, but how? So it sort of goes in with that why at the beginning. Just how are you going to achieve that thing, and what are you going to do? Is it a habit? Is it a trigger? Is it someone else you're doing it with? But something more tangible that you can actually say, right, it's okay, it's Thursday evening. That's the time when I said I'm going to do X.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like mini vision and strategy for every goal, isn't it? It's like the end goal is to lose weight. The strategy is how we're going to get there, what we're going to do, how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I was just thinking when you're saying that, I think there is that danger, isn't it, where you try and where you try and fill every minute of every day with a goal. I think that can be a trap as well, of like, okay, well, I'm going to try and learn language, so I've got to do 10 minutes a day on Duolingo, and then I've got to do like my run, and then I've got to do my thing, and then I've got to do my thing, and before you know it, it's like, well, you're just doing stuff for the sake of doing stuff, and that maybe all be well and good. I don't know. It's kind of...
Well, maybe if you're that type of person, but there's surely scope in all of our lives to just have some downtime where you're not having to fill that minute with 60 seconds run. You know, you can actually just say, I'm just going to have a breather for a bit. Maybe read a book. That's something I've got out of the habit of doing, is just reading books for leisure. You know, I'll read business books and so on, but just sitting down and get my head stuck into a novel, there's just so many other things going on, goals maybe. So many other
goals,
that you sort of keep busy with. So maybe the trick is to have a few really important ones rather than trying to have too many and spread yourself too thin. Or maybe just have one.
I think some of it's like time frame as well, isn't it? So have, like, what are your longer term goals? What's your 5-year, 10-year, 20-year? And I don't think we're forced now into a culture where it's what you're going to do this day, this minute, this, you know, kind of all of that, rather as opposed to looking at much longer term goals of, okay, well, maybe I'm going to learn a language, but I'm going to do it over 20 years.
Yeah.
Like, why do I have to do it in, you know?
And do it for pleasure, not just to say that you're going to pass an exam or whatever, but structure your holidays or your weekends away around it, or watching a foreign language film or something. These are things that you might actually enjoy doing, and it just goes in anyway.
And it goes in anyway as part of a longer term, bigger goal. You know, so I think it's interesting as well. Like, what's the time scale on some of these goals? What's the, you know, it is good to time bound things, and there are things that do need to be done where you need to say, and a year is a convenient unit of measure potentially for doing something, but it may well be that that's a stepping stone goal towards a bigger goal. So,
but it's funny how so many goals are based around the year. Maybe it's the New Year's resolution thing, or the way the budget cycles work in business, but why should it be? You know, a year's actually quite a long time to be thinking about something. If you're developing something new, especially a new habit, you might be able to develop a habit in 3 months, let's say. Yeah. But as you say, at the other end of the spectrum, some goals, like learning a language, could well take considerably more than a year. Certainly if you're not full-time devoting yourself to doing that one thing, better to say, right, in 20 years' time, I'll be able to go on holiday in X country and at least, you know, have a passable competency in the language.
Well, I think it's just like it's kind of nested, isn't it? I think you don't, you know, one of my goals for this year or something, something I've always, maybe it's not a goal, it's just something I've been thinking about for ages, is about having a kind of vision board, which is a bit, it always comes across sounding really cheesy.
Don't be so defensive about
it. But they always just come across, because they come across cheesy, but maybe that's just our British cynicism on all this. But to actually say to like the kids and then say like, okay, what do you want to do then? Like, you know, you've got another 4 or 5 years here. What can we help you with? What's your vision? Okay, well then that breaks down into some goals and into some things you can do and help with and all that kind of thing. So I think there is that kind of bigger picture thinking about people's lives. What is your vision for your life? What do you want to do? What do you want to be remembered for? What, you know, how can you help and do your bit or whatever? So what is that vision, and then how are you working towards it? And then that, I think, gives you the why a bit more purpose, rather than
it sounds like really strong on the why,
rather than the kind of arbitrary. I just want to read 20 books. This why? Well, because there's no bad thing reading 20 books, but is it so that you can fulfill some large purpose,
or just brag that you've read 20
books? So it's. Or you just want to get back into whatever it is. But I think rooting it in some kind of bigger purpose, a vision of life, is something that I think a lot of people miss, because our lives are becoming a lot more myopic and a lot more
and social media led and influenced.
And
which I think is where it goes back to that beginning bit where I said, does it really matter? If you're not feeling passionate enough about improving something, don't artificially set a goal around it. And I see this in business. You know, here we are, we're in a business growth business, right? That's what we do. We help businesses to grow. And yet sometimes you find people that are actually remarkably comfortable where they are. And whilst they know that there's capacity for their business to grow and they would be better off, they've already reached a point where they're comfortable. And it's no longer a pain for them. You know, they can afford what they need, they can go on holidays, what they want, pension's okay. It's a classic sort of lifestyle business type problem. And to try and get a business like that to set a goal to grow by 10% or 20% or whatever it is, it becomes too artificial, because they don't really need it. And yet there's probably loads of other things, like you say, if you were to really dig into the why, what do you want to be really, or how do you want to leave a mark, or what is it if you could change something?
Yeah.
Give up something you're doing, or just get yourself a bit healthier, or whatever it may be. So I can tie into that a bit more. But it's this almost this reaction or this instinct for people to set goals because they feel they should, and then they pick the wrong ones, or they pick ones that maybe it's just to tick a box in their mind, say, right, I've got my goals for the year, but by the second week of January, they couldn't even recall what they were. So I like the idea that you're sitting down with the kids and really understanding something, because presumably you'll then be able to refer back to that at various occasions through the year, whether it's what they're doing on a Saturday morning or what holidays you're planning or whatever. That's not going to help your goals, guys, or this one will really help your goals. Let's do that.
Yeah.
And you can tie things back to it.
And I think it's that having that bigger picture view of it, isn't it? Because I think otherwise it does become, like you say, there's nothing wrong if you're just saying, okay, I want to set some arbitrary goal just so I can show that I can do some arbitrary goal. That's fine, right? You prove something to yourself. There's nothing wrong in that.
Maybe I was dismissing it too readily. It seemed a bit of a circular argument, but you're right. It does have some purpose. Yeah.
Why climb a mountain kind of thing, isn't it? Because it's there to be climbed.
It was there. Yeah.
So but I think there is that. I think there is some virtue in having a goal where it just requires discipline and to get it done, and there's a lot of character formation and things like that in it.
Yeah.
But I do think there's an element of saying, okay, well, what's the bigger picture here over a 20, 30, 40 year time span as to, well, who do I want to be in? Yeah. What does Richard Buckle look like when he's 80? Yeah. And what has he done? And then look back and say, okay, well, probably sitting around watching Netflix isn't going to help that.
Maybe this timescale thing needs exploring in both directions. One is the much longer term one, more than just a year, just to say, right, what's it all for? Now how do I really root what I'm going to now try and do that's different into something that makes sense many years ahead? Yeah. But then at the other end, really bring it down to something that allows me to tangibly work out, what do I have to do differently today? And there's a bit about short-term monitoring of progress, if nothing. If you're going to do the weight loss thing, maybe you don't just wait till the end of the year and weigh yourself again. You might do something in the meantime, and weight loss doesn't happen on its own. It'll be something else. So are you going to count calories? You can do more exercise, and then measure that on a shorter-term thing. Something that we got into the habit a lot more of before Christmas, and I'm keen to pick it up again, is have a much clearer view of what our expectations are of ourselves in a week at work. What would a good week look like for me this week as I sit on Monday morning? And then on Friday afternoon, allow yourself the space to actually say, that's been a good week. I've not managed to get to inbox zero. I've not managed to clear everything off that everybody wants. I accept that. But I knew that they were always going to be impossible tasks because there's an infinite amount of stuff we can do to help people. Yeah. But if a good week looks like this on Monday morning and I've achieved those things by Friday afternoon, great. Yeah. Let's go for a pint of alcohol-free beer and celebrate the fact that we've done something, or even on a daily basis or whatever. Just have I managed to do that little thing that does achieve the longer-term multi-year view as to why, but I've done something today or this week or this month.
And if you haven't done it, why? You can do that analysis. Oh, okay, well, this thing happened, or got man flu or whatever it was, and it kind of gives you that. Well, it's not excuses. Maybe it is, I don't know, but it at least gives you a reason why, because you're actually, what you're doing through that whole process, I think, is bringing accountability to the very forefront of how you work, live, act type of thing. Yeah. Because you're setting a goal to say, I want to measure how well I'm doing. Yeah. There's some sort of thinking around, vision actually being a kind of measurement. Like if you don't have that vision, then how do you actually measure success? How do you measure? How do you know when you've achieved something if you haven't actually painted that picture to say, this is where I want to get to, type of thing? But yeah.
You've got to design that yardstick, I suppose.
Start using my hands more when I talk about this stuff. I just notice that myself, but self, out-of-body experience. Passion.
You're getting quite into this, aren't you? Yeah. Well, I know it ties into lots of other things that you think very deeply about. So it's an interesting topic. And one that I wanted to bring a bit of flavour to as a side of the usual, these are the 3 things you should do when you set your goals. And even maybe break away from the very fact that we're doing, which is to think about it in January every year. It doesn't have to only happen once a year. At any point, you might suddenly see an opportunity to do something.
Because I found that. So when I got to probably about the 28th of December, I thought, I could just stop drinking. I wasn't drinking a lot, to be fair, but I was like, I know that I'm going to do dry January. I want to do it. And I thought, why don't I just stop now? Yeah. Because
Well, because you had a New Year's Eve party.
But it's like no, it's got to be January. And I was like, this is just so arbitrary.
Yeah,
it's just another
daft thing.
Another thing. So, but yeah, I don't know. I think there's an element of this as well as of pragmatism. Do what works for you, isn't it? There's no one size fits all for actually getting it done. I don't think.
No, absolutely. But don't fall into the same sort of tropes, if you like, that people tend to do, which is the New Year's resolution style. I'm going to join the gym, and then 3 weeks later you've lost your pass, and you're not going to go over.
Well, I suppose in a way, just thinking about it, the podcast was there was an initial goal to start a podcast.
Yeah.
Because we talked about it for so long, it was like, right, can we just have some action and somebody buy some kit that would enable us to actually record something? True. Then it was, right, let's get to 3 episodes because 90% of podcasts don't make it that far. So, right, okay, we're top 10% podcast, 3 episodes, we're on our way. And then the next milestone was 21 episodes because that was apparently, less than 1% of podcasts make it past 99. So right now we're top 1%. And then by that point, you've almost formed that habit, though.
Yeah. I think once something's ingrained in habit, you've kind of achieved the goal. Because our goal wasn't to get to 100 podcasts. Our goal was to do a regular podcast. And now the thought of stopping it seems inconceivable because it's now part of what we do and people know us for it and we enjoy it, and it's always a good opportunity to sort of anchor the week around it. But maybe we should use that same sort of self-challenging to do other things that we want to do. We can always improve the way we work internally. And maybe we need to think of more of a challenge like that we could both properly buy into, rather than one of these almost artificial fill the form in, this is the vision, how does that break down into the goals, what you're doing this week and all that. It's got to be something that you really want to do.
Yeah, there's a danger it becomes quite reductionist, isn't it?
Yeah. So are you going to confess to any more goals for this year then? You got your dry January you're going to do?
Oh, I've got a big health kick this year.
Yeah.
I'm reaching that age.
What's that going to look like?
I'm as old as me gums. I've got to lose some weight and better sleep. I'm doing a lot of reading about sleep at the moment.
Yeah.
And cortisol, and I've got terrible sleep habits.
Do you monitor that on your watch?
No, but I should do really. Yeah. But it's
I think sleep is underrated. Yeah, I think
massively underrated.
Increasingly, people are taking a notice.
And a lot of cortisol. I mean, cortisol. So that's the hormone that wakes you up. So if you've got too much of that in your body, then
they say you shouldn't have coffee too early in the morning because it stops the cortisol production. The waking up drug, because caffeine does it instead. So it stops it. So they say wait at least an hour, maybe 2 before you have your first coffee.
Before you do that.
So health, that's a good driver though, isn't it? That's a really good long-term.
Well, and a lot of that then is driven around, you start looking at thinking, well, you're not getting any younger. all that.
You're certainly getting to an age, aren't you?
But, I read this thing a while ago about when you get to 44, there's something happens to you, and there's another one that happens at 60. Like there's a kind of earthquake moment in your biological clock or whatever and I thought this can't be. I've got to do something to reverse that. So that's sort of just do you
think it's easier then to come up with personal health, happiness related goals than it is around business goals? It means more.
I think you've got more agency over it, haven't you?
You certainly got more agency. But I think there is an argument that it does mean so much more. Life and death is a lot more important than just how much profit you make every year, right?
Yeah, I think though, particularly for business owners, the things get so interconnected anyway, don't they? So it's all like
there's correlation, isn't there?
If you feel more energized and fitter and whatever, and your mental health as well, then you're more likely to make better decisions and be more optimistic. And like if you were to spend 10 minutes scrolling through Instagram at the moment and you've got a kind of business feed coming in and state of the country, you'd be packing your suitcases.
It'd be pretty depressing.
It's pretty depressing. And yet actually, back to what we were talking about the other day with Roger Martin Fagg's advice of always just, you can't control the stuff that's happening. Just be the best you can be at what you do, keep adding value. Well, if you just focused on that, you're probably going to be in a better shape. So I think there's so many personal goals, personal things that cross over, particularly when you're at the business owner, maybe even senior leader in an organisation, where you've got influence to shape things. You can really shape a business by the attitudes and kind of influences of the owners.
Yeah, and that leadership and leading by example and having that energy level.
Authenticity and just energy levels and everything. So I think it's a good competitive advantage potentially as well.
So it does cross over, you're right.
Yeah.
It's just anchoring it into the right why, which is where we started out, wasn't it? And for me, it's making sure that you boil that then into the how, so you don't just have this nebulous sort of I want to be better type of goal. It's got to be something you can physically do something about. Good, okay. Well, good summary then for the beginning of the new year on goals. Thanks a lot for listening to that episode about goals. And hopefully we've given you a little bit more perspective than the usual stuff that you read about this topic, which isn't just about smart objectives and all that, but more about be kind to yourself, choose things that really matter, find other people to do it with, check in regularly, adjust as you go along, be aware of the obstacles, all that type of stuff. So thanks for listening again, and thanks again for forwarding on the news about this podcast to others. Our listener figures are still going up very healthily on YouTube, so thank you very much for that. And also thanks to you listening on the podcast platforms. Tell your friends about it, mention it in the pub, send them an email, send them a link, whatever it may be. And in the meantime, good luck with your business.